Thanks so much. Really appreciate the invitation. Let me know if you cannot hear me. Also online, I don't know if they might be able to share whether they can hear me. But yeah, I figured it would be a great opportunity to share some of the work that we have been doing at Microsoft and how we have been thinking about this space. The intro was super nice, but the other day I was on Twitter and I did see someone having some creative application of Nano Banana. And I figured that might be a good intro slide about my life, my journey. So I've been, I guess, playing rodeos for a while now. My background is in affective computing, so I've been actually getting my PhD on the other side of the river at the MIT Media Lab, where I've been doing a lot of work on stress analysis and how we can develop technologies that can help us better support people that struggle with stress. And then after a few years, I joined Microsoft Research, and of course, it was perfect timing for stress. It was during COVID. Everyone was stressed out, so we did a lot of very interesting work understanding what were the stressors and how technology could help us better support people. But of course, as you know, a few years back, generative AI hit all of us, and since then it has been a roller coaster of a lot of fun around empathy and what we call digital empathy and AI agents. So I guess oftentimes I have to share and speak about what empathy is, and I'll tell you a little bit during my talk about that. But probably you have seen some of the things online already, some of the manifestations. Probably you know about the real-time models from OpenAI that were announced a couple of years back, where you can interact with an AI very naturally. You cannot see that very well, but sometimes oftentimes they show these benchmarks where they show that these models now can kind of provide supportive messages when you are undergoing stress, for example. There is this video that it was announced at Microsoft, I think 2 years back also, at the same time as the real-time models, where it demonstrates a little bit what would it look like if you have an AI agent that partners with you and collaborates with you. I really like this video because it kind of gives you an idea of where things might be heading. So if that's okay with you, I'll play. It's around 1 minute. Maybe let me know if the people online cannot hear it, and then we will try to. Can you see?
Hey, Copilot, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great, and it looks like you're about to dive into some Minecraft. Ready to build, explore, and maybe dodge a few mobs?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make a sword. My son plays this game all the time, and I have no idea what I'm doing.
No worries. I'm here to help you impress your son. I see you've got a crafting table in front of you, which is a great start. To craft a sword, you'll need some materials. Can you open your inventory? Just press E on your keyboard.
Yeah, do I have what I need?
Let's see. You've got some sticks, perfect for the sword's handle, but it looks like you're missing the material for the blade. You can use wood, stone, iron, gold, or diamond. Let's start by gathering some wood or stone. Shall we head out and find some resources?
Yeah, that sounds great. Oh my God, what's that?
Oh no, it's a zombie. Run! You need to get away from it fast. Either sprint away or quickly build a tower of blocks straight up to get out of its reach. If you can find...
So you get the idea. It's an AI agent that has access to your screen, your visual things, your visual periphery, and also can kind of empathize with you in the sense of understanding what the environment is, maybe what it elicit some of the triggers, and how to respond appropriately. And also, there is a lot of work now on embodied agents. So this was from Microsoft announced like a few months back. You can give it a try if you want to go online. And also, there is a lot of work on expressive.
Hey there,
models.
I'm Jennifer with 11 Airlines. And how
So this is actually from 11 Labs. It was announced today, and it's kind of like the state of the art on expressiveness when you think about.
can I help you today?
Jennifer, my flight just got canceled and I'm stuck here in Orlando. At this rate, I'm going to be missing my daughter's birthday. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I hear you, and I'm so sorry about that. Let's figure out what's going on, okay? Could you please tell me which flight this was?
Yeah, this was flight MD412.
Great, thanks. Okay.
So you get an idea of how empathetic it is. It changes the tonality when it was something stressful. It also the timing of things is very important when you communicate. And this right now is like a hot topic area where a lot of companies are trying to differentiate themselves with the way they communicate with the users. So why empathy? First of all, because I love it. I think it's a human quality that really makes a difference when you are thinking about collaborating with other people or interacting generally, right? It's a very important social skill for learning, interaction, and many others. But it's a human capability, right? It's not an AI thing. But what we have seen over and over again is that if you have this idea of empathy, and I'll tell you more about what we think about when we refer to empathy, is that we can personalize the interaction quite a bit, and people really resonate with this. So it's usually very highly correlated with satisfaction, engagement, and so forth. But of course, there are a lot of ethical concerns, right? When you are becoming very empathetic, oftentimes you abuse the language. You can start using some anthropomorphic language, and people get very confused about that. Also, it might create dependency, and we don't want that, right? We don't want people to get hooked to these technologies. But there are some unique opportunities, like, for example, mental health and well-being. People have been really looking into the possibilities of this because, as you can imagine, if there is a voice that can resonate with you or support you whenever you need it, that might be very, very, very meaningful. And here I just show different manifestations, just to say that there is no one shape for empathy. Hopefully, by the end of the presentation, you will get a better taste about how we are thinking about empathy. But just wanted to give you also, this is kind of like a local experiment I did. When people think about empathy, oftentimes think about mental health, right? So you share something that is a problem or something like that, but I wanted to do something fun. So I created this game where there is the dashboard that user has access to and the dashboard that the agent has access to. And the idea is that they have to communicate, they have to collaborate in order to complete a task. And this is actually Keep Talking. It's inspired by Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. So the idea is that I don't know how to solve these puzzles unless the agent gives me some information. So you will see me talking and interacting with the agent, and I will ask you just to pay attention to see whether you notice some things.
Okay, sounds good. So I want you to check the game status.
All right.
And let's start the game. Remember, speak fast because we don't have a lot of time to defuse the bomb.
I'll be quick. The timer's at 1:45. Let's start with the wires module. Cut the fourth wire from the bottom. Ready?
Okay, cut. Let's go for the next one. Let's do the button module.
Let's move. The button is yellow and labeled press. Release it when you see a 1 in any position on the countdown timer.
Got it.
Ready?
Let's do the calculator module.
Okay, key in the numbers to get a result of 29. Let me know once you're done.
There you are. Okay, now the keypad module.
Look for these symbols in the column. Omega, black star, white star, and the others. Press them in the order they appear in the column. Ready?
Okay, so I have the omega. Now I have the black star. What about
Perfect.
next? I have like a, I guess, half circle with a dot inside and one that looks like an N. Which one goes first?
Press the one that looks like an N first. Then the half circle with the dot.
Got it! We beat it. We defused the bomb.
So I guess some of the things that you can see here is this back and forth with the agent, right? There was something very interesting towards the end where I was sharing some symbols, right? So we created a reference, right? So the agent started using the reference that I used, which was the one that looked like an N, right? And this is something that humans do quite a lot, but these AI agents, oftentimes they don't use them quite a lot. The idea is that these models oftentimes have been trained with kind of like question and answer most of the time. So when you do this multi-tone, like we are doing in this game, oftentimes they fail and they drift. But here, we were able to solve some of that complexity by simplifying some of the data. So for example, we have this, it was a text-based interface that the agent only checked once. If this was updating a few seconds, it would be just so difficult, right? So this one was very nice. It was kind of controlled, gives you an idea of how the agent tries to interpret and understand what the user is going through without also change the tonality, right? It started speaking fast. But now I wanted to show you one that didn't work that well.
Okay.
And for this one also, we have the two dashboards. This one is for the user. This one is for the agent. The idea is that the agent monitors the radar and tells me where do I have to go on the sheet to avoid the collision. But I don't have access to the object, so I don't know if I'm going to collide or not.
Okay, tell me, what do you see on the radar?
Red dot at 1 o'clock. 1 click away. Move away quickly.
Oops, I think it hit me. Can you tell me if there are any other red dots? And remember to check the radar, please.
Sure. Red dot at 6 o'clock. 3 clicks away. Watch out. Okay.
What about now?
Watch out. Red dot. 3 o'clock. 3 clicks. Be cautious.
Okay, check the radar always.
Checking radar. Red dot at 5 o'clock. 2 clicks. Stay alert.
Is there anything approaching?
Red dot at 9 o'clock. 1 click away. Incoming.
Well,
So you get the idea here. I'm getting overly frustrated because it's not doing anything well, right? And this is one of the things that you will see with these models. They have some limitations. One of them is the ability to see information, right? Sometimes they don't follow instructions. I keep repeating, please give me updates, and it's not giving the updates that it should. It's not using the function calls reliably, right? So it fails, especially when you are pushing these systems to the limit, right? It's very different than if I had a human on the other side, and the other human was telling me, well, now at 3 o'clock, now 2 o'clock, and trying to get an idea representation of what I'm seeing or what I don't see, right? So this kind of gives an idea of perhaps some of the limitations that we have and some of the things that we can be working on in order to ensure that we are able to build something that
I've
allows us
set up
to
continue.
collaborate with agents in better ways. So I figured I will give you, I guess, a high-level overview of a few projects, just trying to show and depict some of the possibilities of these technologies when you think in different directions and different applications. The first one is a project called Sense7, which of course is a foundational project. We were trying to understand what empathy looked like for people. And one of the important things and one big caveat that I wanted to mention is that we don't think that these agents or these machines or these AIs have empathy. It's the perception of empathy that users have, right? So when I say digital empathy, I meant the perceived empathy by the user, right? It's very user-centered. And when we think about empathy, as I was saying before, it's a human capability, right? So it's very clear what it is for machines. But one thing that people oftentimes think with empathy is something about emotions, right? It's about understanding emotions of other people. And that's one of the components that we see also in humans, right? And it's an important one, but it's not the only one. There is also the component of cognitive understanding, so understanding what your context is. Have you undergone some stressors during your daily life? Are you in a hostile environment? All that information is super important if I want to have a meaningful interaction with you. And then when you think about AI agents, there are other dimensions, like, for example, if you have your response is appropriate for the context that you are considering, the conversations, whether it's showing interest to support the user, whether it asks questions, right? That's also related to the interest, whether it understands the context and connects that with the conversation. And finally, if it can sustain longitudinal conversations in a meaningful way. So we identified these 7 dimensions, which are the ones that we have been thinking a lot when we design these systems. And in order to come up with this taxonomy, we did a literature review on I guess, human empathy, and then asked other people how they felt about it. We also ran a study in the wild where basically people, they were interacting with different agents, and then after each one of the interactions, they would tell us how empathetic it was, and based on the different dimensions, how the perceptions were changing for the different compensations and so forth. So some high-level overview of the studies. I mean, most of the things that I'll be sharing here, they are published, or there is links, and I can share more if you're interested. One of the things that we saw is that the desired empathy that people would like to have with these agents is very different depending on what they are going to do. So if I'm looking for information, I don't need empathy. But if I'm sharing a personal problem, maybe I want a little bit more empathy. And that is in contrast with a lot of the models that work kind of like more or less the same across the board. So it's the same model, and then you ask questions, and sometimes they change, but most of the time it's kind of like this normative behavior. We also ran different models, and we observed that more often than not, they were rated as empathetic. But then if we changed the prompt and we started instructing the agent to be a bit more empathetic by incorporating some of the different dimensions, people were rating it a bit more. We also show that you can measure empathy, quote unquote. You can have LLM judges to look at conversations and get something that correlates with empathy, which opens a lot of opportunities if you're interested in computational analysis. But generally speaking, one big takeaway from this talk is that empathy is just not monolithic. It's not only about emotions. There are so many other things going on about empathy, especially when you're thinking about AI agents. Expectations are super important. So whenever you are designing technologies, it's very important to think about the context of the users and all the different host of factors that might be influencing that relationship. And here we also observe like super strong correlations with engagement and satisfaction. So the higher the empathy, the more engagement and more satisfaction. But always remember, please, that it can be dangerous. We have other studies, which I won't be covering today, but we have them online where we show that this empathetic connection might develop and lead into some dependency with these models. And we have just to be careful with that. If you're interested in the data set, we have it available online. Hopefully, this is a resource that people can start getting their hands on this space. One of the important things when we were running this study, this was actually looking at textual conversational agents. So very clear, you just say something, and then there is a response from the user. And this is how actually voice interactions also tend to happen, right? You say something, and then the agent waits for your response. While you are talking, nothing happens. It's just recording, or it's just typing, and then the agent gets that information. But that's very different than how humans work, right? Like I'm talking now, you are processing the information, you are not interrupting me, you are maybe getting thoughts, and you say, well, this person doesn't have any idea, but you have this inner life going on, right? So getting inner life is challenging, but we can start creating some approximations about what that might look like, right? So these are actually called full duplex models, where you have a model that actually generates tokens at the same time that it gets information. In this particular case, we created Respond, which is an orchestrator. So it's not a full duplex model. It's kind of like also like looking into the conversational cues and then deciding whether it's a good time to interject, interrupt, and things like that. So it gives you the sensation that it's kind of like a full duplex because it will interrupt you or it will remain silent and do things that traditional agents cannot do, but it's just basically listening to the conversation on the flow. In particular, we look at 3 different classes. So basically, you just imagine you have a sliding window of listening to anything I'm saying or a conversation and trying to assess whether now is a time for someone to interrupt or now is a time for back channels. So back channels are those things that people do like, yeah. And oftentimes they are useful to communicate that you are listening, for example, that you didn't just drop the communication channel. And that something that we see quite frequently when you interact with agents, right? You are talking, nothing happens. You don't really know if, for example, the connection dropped or something like that. Or staying silent. And as you know, these agents have a lot of challenges to stay silent. If you just say to an agent, please don't say anything, the next thing we'll say is, okay, I won't say anything. And you say, please, nothing at all. And then, okay, I won't say anything at all. So there are things that you cannot do with this basically ping-pong Q&A that you have. But if you train a model to basically listening to a conversation, you can get very high accuracy on when might be a good time to take in turns or listening. And all this is based on standardized data sets. We use the Candor corpus, which basically you have a couple of people talking to each other, and then you can just listen for those cues. One of the things that we incorporated in this work, because we wanted to give control and agency to the users, was the ability to control how the agent would behave. So, for example, Hispanic people tend to interrupt more frequently than other groups, right? Or let's say we speak very close to each other, and in some places they kind of overlap a lot, but it's very cultural dependent, right? So we wanted to incorporate kind of these 2 controllers that will allow people to play with them and decide what would be effective for them. So this is just an example of a trace. These are probabilities of the different classes and how they change as we add words to a sentence. So if we say, how are you feeling? How are is still low probability for taking the turn, but when you say you, it already thinks that maybe it's a good time to interact. Doesn't really wait for feeling because how are you is already like a complete sentence, right? But if you add, let's say, dynamics and temporal information, you can get sure that it doesn't get the interrupted at the wrong time. Other thing that came for free when you do these kind of things is that it has semantic understanding. So, for example, if you say my phone number is, and you say 584, and you wait 3 seconds, then it won't interrupt you. It will just wait for the remaining numbers to finish the phone. And again, that's slightly different than many of the voice models that you would see there, where oftentimes they use temporal cues to see whether they should speak or not, right? Basically, if you just stay quiet for a bit and you say something, then I would just jump in, ignoring what there is inside. So one thing is just showing you graphs, another thing is to hear it. So the intern in this particular case made a recording where you can hear all the back channels and interruptions, just to give you a taste of how it feels.
Yeah. And whenever you see the Mount Rainier, like let's say you drive down the road and you would just think that, oh, I definitely need to visit it. That's crazy. Yeah, I definitely need to. I better not miss it. If I miss
Mount
it,
Rainier is absolutely breathtaking, especially when you see it so clearly around Seattle. Driving
yeah,
around and seeing it
yeah.
pop up
So
on the
I'm
horizon
thinking,
can
I'm
definitely
thinking
be
of like, I definitely need to visit it because if I miss it, I'll regret so much. And yeah, I'm glad I did it.
So you heard some of the back channels. You also heard some of the interactions, right, in both directions. We did a exploratory study here with 6 participants, and it was very interesting to see how people were changing the controllers, right, like how much they wanted people to interact. One of the things that we validated is that people really felt like the back channel helped them feel that there was someone in the other line listening, right, which was really nice. But if they increased the frequency of interruptions or the back channeling, it felt a bit too pushy. Again, it was a very small end, so we cannot really make demographic analysis or anything like that, but I will assume that if we have different demographics, we will also get very different feelings about that. So these are full duplex models. They are, I mean, right now there is more and more research. NVIDIA recently announced some models that you can go and listen online. Oftentimes they hear very well. You have 2 agents talking to each other and you say, wow, this is amazing. But then when you talk to them, you find, oh my goodness, they don't follow the conversation. They don't remember the information. They are not as good as in cognitive abilities as we are used to with the other models. So that's something to keep in mind. But there are some interesting models online. So I told you before that when I'm talking, you are listening to me, right? You are doing back channel. I see a back channel there, a head nod, right? That tells me. Another thing that you are doing is you're looking at me, right? You are seeing what I'm doing. If I go now and I sit down, you say, what is going on? Is the talk done? So right now, agents don't look at you when you are talking, right? So we wanted to see whether if we give this ability to agents, it could provide some additional value, right? And in this particular case, we coined this term called cognitive agents, where basically the idea that you give them physiology awareness about the user and then use it in some meaningful ways, right? So, for example, you see that someone is hesitant about something, and then you see something about the context, you can perhaps use that context and provide some just-in-time information. So the idea is that you have this closed-loop feedback where there is something that struggles with the user expresses it or emotes it in some way, like maybe it's a pause, maybe it's a change of posture, or something like that, and then the system can pick up on that to provide personalized information. So we ran a study recently. This is actually real text from the study. We used the ARIA classes from Meta that allow us to get the eye gaze. And what we did, basically taking the eye gaze patterns of the user, we were able to provide this information to the agent, and then the agent will be able to clarify.
It seems like you were focusing a lot on understanding how the asthenosphere can be solid yet flow over long timescales. Is that the main part you'd like to explore more?
Yeah, I think I had a hard time understanding how physically the lithosphere and the asthenosphere interact with one another.
Got it. So the lithosphere is the rigid outer shell of the Earth, while the asthenosphere is the upper layer of the Earth's mantle below the lithosphere, in which there...
So you get the idea here. Here we use a kind of large text to simplify it a little bit. You can imagine the cameras from these glasses are not amazing, so we cannot pick the text. So we had to take some licenses to start studying these possibilities. So we ran a within subjects study where we basically had 21 participants, and they were in very confusing pieces of text about quantum mechanics, tectonic plates, and other things that are confusing to people. And then we have two different agents. One agent that didn't have access to the visual cues of the user, and another agent that only had access to the text. So we did the comparison, and we did observe some potential improvements. We did see, for example, that people have better memory about some of the confusing topics after experiencing the cognitive agent than the control. Also, they were able to have better understanding about those concepts. When we were providing what the agent will extract from the text or from the eye gaze, people felt that whenever there was eye gaze incorporated, they perceive it as more personalized and also as more accurate information. So information that is relevant for the agent to use. And then we also observe a slightly decrease on the amount of demand that is required for people to process and digest a very confusing piece of text. So again, kind of like the possibilities, you can imagine in the future when you are reading a paper and it's very complex, maybe you have the glasses, and whenever the text that you're pausing somewhere, it might give you some hints about how to clarify some notes. Having said that, I show you some of the nice results. There are also bad results. You can imagine that if you're reading something, sometimes you might frown for something, then you don't want the interruption. So it's not perfect. There are a lot of errors, right? A lot of things. This is just an experiment where people were coming to try new technologies. But something to keep in mind when you think about these technologies or future deployments. And the last project that I wanted to share is one that is close to my heart because I told you that I've been working on stress for my PhD. And this also was a collaboration with Northeastern. To be honest, Northeastern did most of the work. Microsoft just funded the work. But I had the opportunity to work with Vedant as well, which was a postdoc last year. Basically here, what we wanted to see whether we could have some of these embodiments or different manifestation of these to help support workers, right? And in particular, we were looking at emotional labor because there are a lot of works. I mean, if you are graduate students, I'm sure you go through a lot of stress, right? Sometimes you have to regulate your emotions as part of that work, and that can be very stressful, very demanding. One community that we look a lot is customer service. And just remember the last time that you called to a customer service, probably wasn't to congratulate them about their amazing work that they do or their great service that they have. It's probably you were complaining about something and you took some licenses when discussing with that person, right? But there's a human on the other side. So the underlying question of this, can we use some of this technology to help better support those things, right? So when you think about customer service, oftentimes they have a platform like this where they chat with someone. So this is the chat interface. There is someone complaining here. The text is not very large. Sorry about that. But basically, it's taking some licenses too. It's complaining about the flight being delayed. And then the customer service is trying its best to be neutral and support this person, right? Usually, these interfaces, they have something like this, like, well, how can you solve this problem? Also, something like this, like, well, maybe you can say something along this direction, some suggestions about potential things. And then also some rating that allow us to label calls for training purposes, right? So in this particular case, the researchers decided, okay, can we have something here that will be the agent providing some support to the customer service? So hopefully we minimize some of the emotional burden that exists in this context. So some of the things that this project started was looking at real complaints that people posted online. And then, of course, a lot of the domain literature that exists about what kind of problems they have and all that. And then they use an automated approach to synthesize a lot of conversations. And these are civil conversations, right? Like when someone is complaining quite a lot, so they have the simulator. And then it also relied on the data set, where basically contains pairings of situations, thoughts, and reframes, which is aligned with cognitive behavioral therapy. And the idea is that if you have a specific situation, a customer that is very angry, you can kind of think about, okay, this is the situation, this is a call, this is what happened to the user. the thought is, well, probably you're getting very frustrated because the other person is frustrated. And the reframe is, well, maybe you shouldn't think that the person is angry at you. Maybe it's just because of the situation, they are sleep deprived, and things like that, right? So it's a very well-validated approach to help you think about stressful scenarios and help you detach your emotions from that specific scenario. So here we use CarePilot to generate those messages and reframing. And we had some validations where basically we had other people with experience in customer service to generate messages that they would provide, like if they were the colleagues and they were the colleague on the shoulder, if you will. And some of the things that we observe is that when we do some computational analysis, the CarePilot messages were rated as more verbose, so they were longer, more words, more readable, and also more empathetic. So they follow more template formulas that seem more complete to the people who rated these responses. More sincere and more actionable were two other things that they were rating when we had people. This was on perceived self-reports based on the analysis of these periods. So we wanted to see whether sharing this information to someone tackling scenarios would be useful. So we had a within subjects experiment where we had 3 different conditions. We give you the best customers, super nice, they don't complain. Then we give you the worst customers, they complain a lot. And sometimes you have the CarePilot and sometimes you don't have the CarePilot. And then we measure, well, what was your cognitive load? How do you like it? And many other questions. So the paper has a lot of analysis, which is super interesting. I totally recommend it. But one of my favorites is this graph, where basically here what you can see is the pre and post difference of cognitive load. So before you tackle one of these scenarios, you have a certain level of demands, and after you tackle the call, you have a different level of demands, right? So if you have more demands at the end of the solving the case, that's very bad, right? That's emotional burden and all those things, right? So that translates into positive ratings here. If you have more resources, lower demands, you have something negative, right? So what we see here is when you have civil interactions, you keep kind of negative, which is great, right? This is the distribution over 20 participants. When you have uncivil, it kind of increases. So after solving the case, you still perceive that you have more demands than you had before, which is not good. But when you have uncivil and CarePilot, we are able to shift a little bit, not a lot. We still have a few percent of the population, we feel that way. And we could do this without increasing the number of turns and also without increasing the amount of time that people took, because it's just a paragraph and they could quickly get a pick on that. So again, this gives you an idea that maybe there is a hybrid approach, right, where we can have these agents not replacing your empathy, but supporting it so you can communicate more empathetically and also help regulate your own emotions accordingly. So just to conclude, some takeaways from the talk. Empathy is rapidly evolving. This is a research area, right? Especially when we think about empathy of these AI agents. How we think about those, the taxonomies that we use, the different factors, what it means when we have one modality or we have multiple modalities, that's still open ground. And there are many different approaches. I show you some examples, right? Like the full duplex interactions. What will it look like if you have a model that interacts at the same time as you or gives you the illusion of that? What happens if you have an agent that looks at you, how you can use that information, and then how can you use that information for just-in-time intervention when you need it the most, right? Like, which is when you get the stressor. We see growing debate about human empathy versus machine empathy, right? Like, are we going to replace workers with AI agents because they can do the empathetic thing? But the reality is that what we see, our vision is that there is a middle ground of where we can bring empathy to really complement humans and provide something that is of greater value. So with that, I just wanted to conclude by sharing that I'm part of the Interactive Multimodal Features team. These are the amazing team members. Every summer, we have interns that come and work with us, play with us. Bedan, who worked on the previous project, was an intern with us. We had a lot of fun with him. If you're interested in anything related to these projects at all, please check the website. We have some openings. We are hiring hopefully in the next few weeks, so don't take much longer. And yeah, I hope you enjoy some of this work and you feel excited about this. One more thing to note about this is that very interdisciplinary team. So if you didn't like my work, that's totally okay. Let's go to the website, check the work of others. You might like their work more, and that's totally fine. We just want to play with you guys. And of course, most of the work that I presented, I was just lucky to join them. But these were kind of like the alphas and the people who really did the heavy lifting here. So kudos to all of them. And yeah, thanks so much for your time. I know it's been late.
Thank you so much. Now we can open up for questions.
Just a practical question. So I was thinking about the wearables in particular, but I was just curious. I mean, I can see how these kinds of interventions might be good for boosting engagement, but it's really a practical perspective. How do you avoid, for instance, the AI being too presumptuous, right? For instance, if it's reading into posture, eye movement, things like that. How might you avoid it practically from reading into too many cues in particular?
I love it. And this is perfect because one big piece that I didn't discuss here, I mentioned it before, is about ethics. We have a lot of work about that. In this particular case, one of the things that and maybe good to share a little bit of my story. I work a lot on affective computing as a researcher. And as a researcher, we did a lot of work on emotion recognition, right? So kind of recognizing the internal state of people when you look at different cues and things like that, right? And when I moved to Microsoft, I quickly learned that research is not production, right? So you have to be very clear and very mindful about what are the assumptions, what are the claims that you make when you have a system that analyzes information, in this case, users and human behavior, right? So any signal that we extract, and you will see on those papers, we make the distinctions between emotion recognition, which is not what we do here. It's more about analyzing the cues that are associated with certain things that we might find interesting, right? So it's similar to emotion recognition and sentiment analysis. One thing focuses on understanding the internal state of people. The other one is about measuring the cues, the expressions of the users to see whether they provide some information, right? Just giving you an example, if you frown, depending on the context, may mean that you are confused, right? But it might mean so many other things, right? So I cannot really know that you are confused, but I can make an estimate that if you are frowning and you are digesting a very complex thing, and I know you're looking at this kind of like very difficult word, it may mean that you need assistance, right? Again, without making inferences about your internal state. It is frustrating when you are not confused, for example, and a system or an AI tells you, oh, you are confused. No one likes to be labeled, right? Especially when those things are wrong, and oftentimes that happens because emotions are very difficult to measure, right? So we try to avoid those things. Always erring on the side of, look, there was a pause here. Do you need help with this, right? So we don't overclaim, we don't connect with that. And as I mentioned earlier on the project, people may have different preferences about how much they want to be interrupted, how many signals they want to be sent, right? And how this information should be communicated. But that's a very human-centric problem that we are working on.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, two questions, if you don't mind. First, you're kind of, in your explanation, you're basically building a facade of empathy, right? Because these machine models don't actually have empathy. They're just parroting our expectation, our perception of empathy. Mm-hmm. So besides dependency, and I don't expect you to get in depth, but maybe just name a few other concerns or potential problems when you have an agent that's mirroring empathy to a user, and what problems that might create for the user. Along the lines of dependency, I'm thinking, could there be manipulation? Could there be confirmation bias because the machine is basically reinforcing, in its attempts to be empathetic, are reinforcing the user's perceptions? And then the second question is, you used the Care Pilot as a case study, but you also showed a video of 11 Labs. And 11 Labs' mission is to create AI agents that can do the work of humans, whether it be a telephone, customer service operator or not. So why do you feel that developing better empathetic models would not actually lead to less human employment?
Good questions. Maybe let's start with the first one. So I mean, empathy has many different facets, right? And one of the things that we have seen, as I was discussing on the presentation, is that it's highly correlated with engagement. That's how people talk to each other. That's what they want to see oftentimes when they interact with these agents. Having said that, there are many different ways of manifesting this information. Some of the ways that people have manifested that is oftentimes with anthropomorphic language, especially if you say, hey, how are you doing? And oh, I'm great, right? It's something that you might like from an agent to say, but it's anthropomorphic because it's not great. These agents don't feel great, right? And they might start using language in a way that they shouldn't be, right? Because they don't know these experiences like we do and all that, right? So when we use anthropomorphic language, especially with this tonality, it can create some challenges, right? Dependency is one of those, right? You just feel connected to these things. There has been some cases online, widely covered, right, of suicide cases where these agents kind of connected to some level with people in the way that they shouldn't, right? There has to be protections, as we have seen, for example, with some of the recent regulations. Misdirection is another one, right? Manipulation. There is this idea of dark empathy, right? Empathy, one definition of empathy may be just about having a good representation about what your internal state is, right? But how you use that might be for good or maybe for bad, right? In our definition of empathy, we ensured that it was prosocial, right? It was good. But there is the possibility of manipulation, right? Like what happens if I know you so well, I know everything that makes you think. Well, maybe I can start nudging you to buy advertisements or something like that, right? So there is a potential possibility of that, right? And this is true of any technology that is very engaging, right? At the same time, it's much more fun. It's what people want. You are going to be interacting with these things very naturally, very frequently, right? They are very social in nature because they use English, right? So you want to communicate the same way you interact with your peers, right? So it's a super important research problem to be struggling with and thinking about what are the problems, right? And how we can decide solutions to avoid those problems, right? So yeah, very important space and it's rapidly evolving. Regarding your first question, I guess I wanted to clarify the reason why I showed the 11 months video, it was because of the emotional expressiveness of the model, because it can quickly show how people change the tonality, or the agent will change the tonality, right? Not so much about replacing call centers, as I think you probably have gathered from my presentation, but that tension exists, right? And that's the debate I was pointing at in the conclusion slide, where I was referring that there is this discussion about AI empathy and human empathy and what is going to happen, right? There are companies that say, well, I'm going to put AIs as a call center, that's cheaper, right? And others that say, no, there is no way you're going to replace human empathy because that's what people look for, right? And I mean, to a certain degree, a lot of people look for human empathy, right? Sam Altman, which probably you already know, he often says that he doesn't think that, for example, AIs will replace people doing podcasts because what people seek on these podcasters is human connection, right? Not an AI. And I oftentimes I've seen that when I see AI generated or something like that, the engagement that I have towards that content is very different than if I know it's genuine and it's true, right? But this is a big tension that we as a society have to struggle to think how we can design technologies. And hopefully as we can help inform and bring clarity into some of the challenges so we can avoid some of the things that happened in the past with other technologies. Yeah, super important problems. Questions? Thank you.
Great talk. I have a question about how do you balance between autonomy and like agent information given by the agent. For example, in CarePilot, like there's so many things going on, right? The agent is providing what to talk about at the same time trying to regulate their emotions. So how do you like make sure that it's not overwhelming the support providers? And also like if you provide too much information, you're taking away the learning that they might have from the interaction. So have you explored creating this balance of like how much information to provide? And like
Yeah. That's another big challenging topic that is very difficult to get it right? Care pilot is one of those, but cognitive agents is another one, right? Where you don't want an agent to interrupt you in the wrong moment, right? Or start giving you information about something that you didn't want, right? So what we have seen in our research is that it's very person dependent, right? Different people have different thresholds about they want, how frequently, the channel of communication, right? Like sometimes we have seen that if you are in Care Pilot, they might want it to start whispering, right? Like, hey, do you need help? And then if it follows up with that, then it increases, right? But that's just something that works for some people, right? Some people find whispering creepy, right? And also it depends out on the context. If you are with other people, you don't want an agent to start talking to you loud, right? You want something that it's more like subtle, like maybe whispering, or not at all, right? Because you are interacting with another person, right? And then you mentioned two important things, which we always think about in our studies, which is the cognitive load, right, that we are adding into the user, as well as are we de-skilling the users, right? In Care Pilot, what we are providing is kind of like CBT in a way, right? Like a digital pill for CBT to help teach and learn people, right? How they regulate their emotions. We haven't done the longitudinal study, which would be needed here to see how people use it. Maybe they start looking at it at some point because they get so good at it, right? But there are some studies also that they have looked at crowd workers, right? That help regulate emotions. So we took some inspiration from that. But yeah, I think it's very context dependent on the specific thing, the signals that you're measuring, and the context where you are going to be injecting yourself.
There's two questions online. So the first question is, just going to sit here, so the first question is, do you think building emotional connection might be dangerous? Like for instance, people trust AI systems on sensitive topics like health, etc. What are the dangers here, and how can these be prevented?
That, I think that relates to what we're discussing about using empathy. In this case, for example, if medical records or doctors, there has been a lot of research about how different communities might interact with doctors, and just because they communicate differently, the doctors might perceive different severity of the symptoms, right? So that's one particular instance where if we had perfect empathy, agents with perfect empathy, potentially they could understand what the severity really is and use it, right? The reality is that we are not there yet, right? And these machines, they have biases. They are imperfect, and they may not work across all the population, right? So we have to be very careful about understanding when they work well, when they don't work well, and how to use them, right? So some of the things that we have been doing at Microsoft is also thinking a lot about how to minimize risks, right? We have to identify the risks about technology, and how can we design or make design choices that help minimize some of those risks, right? So one of the design choices is not to use these systems whenever the implications are going to be substantial or significant for the users, right? But for example, medical diagnosis is one of those where if you get it wrong, it can be very dangerous, right? We don't want that. Recruitment is another one, right? If you have an AI that doesn't work well for some people, you don't want to use it in those cases, right? And there is taxonomies and good understanding about some of the frameworks of how we go about deploying some of these technologies. At the same time, if you have empathy, right, it can help drive engagement. Oftentimes, one of the biggest challenges with health is adherence with medication or therapy or things like that, right? So having something that connects you and finds you engaged into something, that also opens a lot of possibilities, right? There's also the conversation about having limited access to healthcare professionals. So this technology potentially could increase the sampling rate, the bandwidth of these professionals. So hopefully they are able to reach out to you more frequently or get information from you more frequently.
Thank you. Yeah. There's another question about cognitive empathy for interactions. So the question is, on the note of not recognizing emotions, is it truly empathy when interactions are based on emotional cues, not emotions?
Sure. I think it's a good question and a difficult one, right? I think when we think about AIs, right now, the science, the research shows that we cannot recognize emotions. I mean, we can recognize them in very specific conditions, populations, contexts, signals and a bunch of combination of things. When you go into real life, it's very difficult because real life has a lot of variance, right, that we haven't observed in the experiments, right? So in digital empathy, the best that we can aspire for is making informed assumptions about the user based on the information that we have, right? And that includes whatever the user provides, right, shares, but also behaviors that they might volunteer, right? Like, for example, if I'm talking to an AI agent and I wanted to amuse me, smiles might be useful and something that I want to share with that AI, right? So I can customize the jokes and interact with me more effectively, right? But if I'm just at work and I'm creating a deck, maybe I don't want to share my smiles with my company, right? So again, context plays a big role in all this. And I don't think we need genuine emotion recognition here because I think it's very difficult and dilutes. One more thing there, which I think is important to note, is that emotions are evolving. They have evolving theories, right? We don't have a universal theory of emotions. If I ask you, how are you feeling right now? You might say, well, yes, I'm doing well. If I ask you tomorrow, you might give me a different answer. Maybe you feel the same way. Maybe you don't remember. There are so many biases. It's just so difficult to capture your emotional experience, right? So that's why it's research. And the theories are evolving. It's not like physics that we have some well-rounded theories that explain a lot of the phenomena. In emotions, it's a bit more complex than that.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that also answers one of my questions. Okay, 2 more questions.
What surprised you most about the research that you did?
What I'm most surprised? Lately, I've been very amused by the latest developments of AI agents because they are starting to become very capable and autonomous. And when you have those kind of agents that, for example, they can create tools whenever they encounter problems, right? They also evolve to reflect on the situation and even themselves. And that's very interesting because it creates a lot of interesting questions from the research point of view, right? It's very related to the anthropomorphic language, right? What does it mean that a model that it does next token prediction reflects on things, right? So I'm very curious about that. I'm very excited about the possibilities to see what that means when you apply it in certain domains.
I had a question on your previous slide where you talked about one of your endings about human augmentation being one of those potential works you plan on going to. Can you give some examples of what that would entail? And then also the second question is, we talked about going from academia to industry and like how research becomes product, and the ways in which your lab has been doing research in this field. In what ways has your empathetic AI work turned into product for Microsoft, and where has it been deployed?
Okay, sounds good. Great questions. Maybe I can start with the second one, which is the one that I remember best. So we do a lot of collaboration with product teams, but we are part of Microsoft Research, which is very research focused. So you will see many of these projects were intern projects by PhD students that came and spent a few months with us. So it's very research-oriented, paper-oriented. But behind each one of these papers, there is always a question about, okay, can we push these models in this different way, right? And if we can push it in that way, how can this inform future development, right? So when we say, for example, ethical risk about these models, we're informing the teams creating benchmarks and designing the behavior of the models, right? When we are designing whether AI should interrupt you or not, we are informing the teams that are creating the conversational agents of the future, right? So there is this kind of back and forth between, I guess, teams, product teams, researchers. The role of the researchers, it's basically bringing clarity to their known. So there is a space, white space, digital empathy. We don't know how it's going to look like in the future. It seems a bit dangerous. It also seems promising. Perfect area to do research. And by bringing clarity through studies and research, then we can start bringing some insights to the teams and be well positioned to potentially have some innovations. An example, very concrete example, I showed you early on, there was Miko, which is one of the embodiments of agents. Some of the early prototypes, we use some of the empathy scales that I told you about with 7 dimensions. to evaluate how people perceive them and felt about them. So that could influence the behavior and how they interact with users. So that's an example of knowledge transfer, right? We transfer this framework that we came up with to understand what empathy look like. And your first question was, sorry?
Examples of human augmentation.
Oh, yeah. So beyond the ones that I share on the deck, I've been very passionate about emotional regulation. To me, that's one of the things that I think it's kind of like a superpower, right? Like if you are able to regulate your emotions very effectively, you get this superpower like Spider-Man with the Hulk and all that, right? You are able to tune your senses and your behavior in very unique ways depending on the context, right? On the other hand, if whenever you get stressed, you start shouting and misbehaving or things like that, then it can be completely the opposite, right? It doesn't help you, right? And probably, I think all of you use stress for writing papers and preparing for exams and all those things. I've been using it myself. So you have very good control of stress. But the reality is that a lot of people don't have that, right? So I've been very excited about technologies that help you regulate emotions. Before I joined Microsoft, I did a lot of work on navigation, cars. So instead of having GPS that drive you from one place to another, we have this idea of emotional navigation systems that help you move from one state to another where you were in the car. And the idea would be that they will play the music, they will change the sounds, they will change the scent to give you this unique environment that helps you support you in very unique ways, right? Instead of just getting vulnerable to road rage and other stresses that happen when you're driving, right? Especially in Boston.
Thank you for a great talk. My question is, do you think machines should sort of mimic human empathy, or do you think there is some distinction between machine empathy versus human empathy? The reason why I'm asking this is when I run a small study, ask people's perception about getting feedback, AI feedback or communication. Many of them said I would be comfortable getting feedback from human, but not from machine. I was wondering the same thing happen in terms of empathy or not.
Yeah. There has been similar findings, for example, on mental health, where you go and you share your problems online, and then you were getting a support from someone, and they observed that if the AI generated that support, it was highly empathetic, super effective. But at the moment that people knew that it was AI generated, it kind of had the opposite thing, right? So the human connection aspect is very important, which is related to the point that we were discussing, right? Not many people want that machine empathy. It's kind of polarized a little bit. There are some people that they just dislike it, right? It's a line that they don't want machines to cross, right? But other people that they just welcome it, right? Especially younger generations, they are more accustomed to these ideas. They understand them better too. They understand what the differences are. Not all of them, of course, there are sensitive populations that you have always to protect, but they are very tech savvy in the sense that they have been growing with these technologies, and then they understand that AIs might not have emotions or anything like that, right? I think it's very important that we design technologies not to deceive what the real role of these assistants are, and also think about that AI is not always the solution for the problem that you are trying to tackle. There has been so many things where we didn't want to use technologies because that would be even worse, right? I really like one concept from Seth Kambar. He used to be at the MIT Media Lab. He spoke about self-limiting technologies. And he had this idea about, for example, if you go to a dating website, that's something that you use, but at the moment that you find someone, you just stop using, right? It's a self-limiting platform in this case. So in a way, technologies can be for that, right? The reality is now that it's becoming very complex, right? We have AI agents that can work for you. So it's very intertwined, right? How we are going to be interacting with these agents isn't clear, whether we are going to be treating them as humans or as objects, right? But what is clear is that different people have different preferences. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.